Hello, everybody. It is so good to be here. A year later. Uh, Good Friday should have happened a year ago, and of course it didn't. And we've all had to persevere for a whole year now. So I'm so happy to just be standing here in front of you today. Probably should tell you who I am. I'm Rick Martins, CEO of the Anaheim Family YMCA. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us today. We are very pleased to be able to welcome those of you that have been a part of our YMCA family for such a long time, as well as those of you that are new to our Anaheim Y and the work we do in our community. During our long history in this community, the Anaheim Family YMCA has gone on to build its reputation by addressing the prevalent needs in our community through programs that build character and bring people together, including safe places after school, swimming, healthy living initiatives, and opportunities for youth to lead and give back to their community. And as we celebrate a 110-year anniversary this year, you can see an example of dedication to our residents by visiting the recently completed first phase of our new community complex. The new community complex will help us serve more families in Anaheim and improve the lives of all residents through health and fitness by providing families with safe opportunities to be active while strengthening the YMCA's goal for bringing together children and adults of all abilities. While never losing sight of the fact that over the last 110 years, the Anaheim Family YMCA has been an anchor organization in this community. Residents, Y board members, and Y staff have worked hard to develop a place that portrays our Y beliefs. We believe active and connected families make for active and connected communities. We believe in a holistic approach to promoting healthy spirit, mind, and body. We believe that in a diverse world, we are stronger when we are inclusive and our doors are open to all. And we believe in protecting the physical and emotional safety of all youth. There is no other charity quite like the Y. The world may be unpredictable, but one thing remains certain. The Anaheim Family YMCA is and will always be dedicated to building healthy, confident youth, connecting families, and strengthening communities. Today marks the occasion where, for the last 53 years, the Good Friday breakfast brought us together for fellowship and inspiration, led in devotion by lay people as we prepare for the joys and triumphs of Easter. Unfortunately, this year, for the safety of all of you and our staff, we're forced to celebrate virtually. But rest assured, your presence is felt. For those of you who could not make our virtual community breakfast in January, we thought we would re-air the presentation by our planned keynote speaker from last year's Good Friday breakfast. John Dalen was a teacher and administrator in the Anaheim Union High School District, a celebrated coach in wrestling and football, a decorated Vietnam War veteran, and has summited the tallest peaks on all 7 continents and been to both the North and South Poles. I think you'll enjoy his perspectives on life, as well as he tells you about his crucibles of life. So, with no further delay, I present to you John Dalen.
Thank you, Rick. Glad to be here this morning to see all of you. This is being done in the YMC lab here. So if I look at the wrong camera or look the wrong way, or if my forehead shines too brightly, I apologize for that. This is early in the morning, great old Zoom, nothing like having a Zoom at 8 o'clock. So hopefully I don't put you back to sleep. You have a cup of coffee there. I promise to be as hopefully a good speaker, and that's be brief, be blunt, and be gone. I want to thank Rick for having me here today. It's great seeing all the people who have signed up to be on the Zoom. There's a lot of wonderful individuals that I've had a chance to be in contact with and have been significant in my life. And I appreciate it very much. I want to thank Rick too for having me here. I've always appreciated everything that the YMCA has done here in the city of Anaheim, doing a lot for the adults and also for the kids. And as I like to say, no one stands so high who bends to help a child, and that's particularly true with the YMCA. Uh, this morning, I hope to leave you with a few tidbits, some experiences. I think some of you saw those a little bit on the trivia bit at the beginning of this program, and leave you with something that will be meaningful in your life about tough times that you may have gone through, trials and tribulations, or as Rick said, the crucibles of life. So I'm going to talk about a few of my crucibles. We all have them. We all have our trials and tribulations. I think with COVID going on now, we're all sort of going through that now. And I hope that once we get through these tough situations, as hopefully I'll indicate in the next few minutes, you put a smile on your face and it'll make a difference in the lives of other people. Going back to my first crucible was in 1968, Vietnam. I had graduated from the University of Oregon, went through ROTC, and I was commissioned an officer. And as a result of that, got my degree, was commissioned officer in the United States Army. And then I went on to get a graduate degree at UCLA. And from that, I was a very smart individual. I knew everything. I was intelligent. As I said, was smart, good looking, all of those great things. And I knew just about everything there was to know in life. I was 22 years old. I was married to the love of my life, Sue, who we've now been married for 55 years, had a beautiful son, Sean, who was very young at that time, needless to say, prior to 1968. And I decided to volunteer for Vietnam. And Sue, although we had a little bit of discussion, she was very much in support of me going to Vietnam, not really, but agreed for me to go. And one of the worst things that ever happened to me is I had to say goodbye to her. That was really, really difficult. And off I went to Vietnam, knowing everything in the world, being a smart 22-year-old. I got on that plane and I can remember they closed the door and I said to myself, oh, have I made the wrong decision here? I don't want this to be a one-way trip. Got on the plane, flew to Vietnam, landed in Vietnam, and they shipped me north to the DMZ during the Tet. And I think those of you that watched the pre-program, you saw some pictures what went on during the Tet. And I jumped into it right away. And quickly, I realized I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. I didn't know everything. And I was in a lot of trouble. And that wasn't good trouble because there were people out there trying to kill me. And I was about ready to die because I thought I was so smart. And I realize now I really didn't know anything. So hearken, what should I do? I decided to, think about my days in the Boy Scouts with my Scoutmaster Keith Monroe, who's a mentor. And he said, always seek out another mentor, someone who could help you. So I looked around and I was then a platoon leader, became a company commander. And the only person I could find was Sergeant First Class Watson. And this sort of an interesting situation because he was a sergeant and I was the officer. And I went to him and I pulled him off the side and I said, he was an old time Korean veteran, just as salty as everything. And I said, Sergeant First Class Watson, I don't know anything. And his affirmation was great. He says, I know you don't know anything, sir. And I said, thank you, Sergeant. And not only do I not know anything, I'm pretty dumb about this whole situation here in Vietnam. And he says, I know that, sir. He always said, sir, to make me feel good. And I said, can you help me out? And he said, I'll help you out. I'll never do it in front of the men. I'll pull you off to the side and we'll have a little chat and I'll try to help you as much as I can to make you a success here in Vietnam. And the only reason that I'm going to help you out, as he explained to me, is I want to be sure none of the men get killed. I want to be sure, and he was talking, that I don't get killed, and then maybe we'll be concerned about you. So he took me under his tutelage. And for the next year, he literally took care of me and kept me alive in Vietnam. And as I said, he would pull me off to the side when none of the men were looking, and he would tell me little tidbits. And he would say, "Sir, this is the way," he always said, "Sir, this is the way to lead your company. Sir, you need to do this. Sir, you need to do that." And he liked to play with me too. I can remember one time he called me off to the side and we were sort of huddling up. And again, none of the men were around. And he said, "You've been brushing your teeth this morning, sir? Have you been brushing your teeth?" And I go, "I brush my teeth every morning." He says, "What are you brushing your teeth with?" And I go, "Crest," or something like that. He says, "You are so stupid." He liked to call me stupid when nobody was around. And he said, "You're so stupid, sir." And he said, "The VC can smell that toothpaste." I said, "Whoa, what should I do?" And he says, "Well, I suggest then that you brush your teeth each morning with soap and water." And I cracked up because I can remember when I was young and I was raised in my family, if you swore, you'd get your mouth washed out with soap and water. So I said, "Thank you, Sergeant." I never did that. I just sort of brushed it with water. But that was Sergeant First Class Watson, who took care of me during my entire tour in Vietnam during that first crucible of my life. And he was about ready to leave the country. And I called him into my little hooch there, and we were in Da Nang off to the side where no one could see us. And he stood there. He was very strack and, was at attention. And I proceeded to tell him in just a few minutes how much I appreciated everything he had done for me, how much I appreciated he saved my life and took care of the men in the company and everything. And he sort of sat there, didn't say anything, real strack. And I said, "Hope to see you again someday." And he saluted me, very strack salute. He then turned around and walked out. And I thought that was the last I'd ever see of him. But before he walked out, he stopped at the door and he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Sir, always remember to work for the people who work for you." And that was the first crucible that I've never forgot. Always work for the people who work for you. And I tried to remember that in all of my future years in any leadership positions. And he walked out of the door, but before he walked out, and I was never to see him again, he turned around and gave me one of my highest accolades. He said to me, "You were a good old man, sir." And for those of you who have been in the service, you know that if you're ever a commanding officer, if the men respect you, they always refer to you as the old man. And that meant a great deal to me. My tour of duty was shortly up thereafter, and I returned home. And now I have a couple of slides to show you of my time in Vietnam. I think you can see that first slide up there. And talking about knowing anything, I didn't know anything about that weapon there. Sergeant First Class took care of me, and that was an example of what it looked like in Da Nang. Next slide. This is me in Hue during the Tet Offensive. Uh, tail end of the Tet Offensive, things weren't going real well, and you can see that they look a little harried there and whatnot. Have my good old rubber band around my right wrist as good luck, and waiting. The night came when the VC and the NVA would come in, and those were tough times. Next slide. This is battle time, and those are rockets coming in, a little bit of water being splashed around our boats as we ran up and down the Perfume River. Next slide. This is one I think you saw earlier, transporting some Marines into battle, and they're having lost a few pounds, tried to look once again, knowing what I was doing, typically with my hands in my pocket. Next slide. And this, one of the happiest moments of my life. The love of my life, my wife Sue, my son Sean, meeting me in San Francisco after my tour in Vietnam. Can't tell you how excited I was, bagging my first slipper, as we would say in those days, after 1 year overseas. That was the end of my first crucible. We'll move on now to my next crucible. And that was very interesting. I returned from Vietnam, and for my whole life, I've always wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I read all of John Wooden's books, and I thought that was the greatest profession. I wasn't concerned about making money. I wasn't concerned about a big house or, being the president or anything like that. I wanted to be a teacher. So I set out to be a teacher. I got my teaching credentials. I was very excited. I attended Santa Monica High School as a high schooler, and I got my first job teaching at Santa Monica High School. I was a substitute teacher, and I have to realize the greatest profession in the world I've always felt is teaching. You teach lives. It's the greatest thing, and I just couldn't wait to start. Sue made my lunch. I had a coat and tie on. I had my lunch and everything. And I moved down to Santa Monica High School for my first day of teaching as a substitute teacher. I got into the office. They said, welcome, Mr. Dalen. You're going to be teaching this morning a physical education class in golf. And I go, great, I'm not a good golfer, but that's not excited. I, in fact, saw a couple of people that I still knew from my days in high school there. And they gave me my little packet and they said, your class is up on the North 40. And that was the north part of the campus. I said, great. And so off I went to the north part of the campus. And there were about 40 students and they were all lined up. They had their buckets of golf balls, but they weren't golf balls. They were little sort of plastic wiffle balls. And they were all lined up, about 40 of them. And I said, hi, welcome. I'm Mr. Dalen, your substitute. Didn't tell them it was my first day of teaching. And formed the golf club, showed them how to do it. I said, okay, guys, get out there and start hitting your golf balls. And there were those little wiffle balls, and they could only hit them about 10 yards. And I showed them a couple things. Found they were doing a good job. And then all of a sudden, I will never forget this, and I'm almost laughing right now. I hear this pew, pew, pew. Some of the kids had snuck real golf balls into their buckets, and they were hitting their real golf balls, which didn't seem like any big deal. But if any of my Samo High friends are listening, you fully understand that they were hitting them over the fence. And on the other side of the fence was the Santa Monica Freeway, the 10 freeway. They were hitting their golf balls out onto the freeway. I freaked out my first day of teaching. I'm going to be fired. I quickly yelled, stop. I didn't know who did it. I said, take your buckets of ball and we're going to, with your wiffle balls, and we're going to go to the other end of the field and we're going to spend the last few minutes. I'm very disappointed in you, but we'll spend the last few minutes hitting the wiffle balls back the other way. And we did that, and they were hitting the wiffle balls again, and I was looking, and everything looked great. And then all of a sudden, once again, choo, 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 I heard that sound, which I'll never forget. And it was some kids had snuck golf balls, regular golf balls, back into their buckets, took them out of their pockets, and they were now hitting them towards the science building, which was opposite of the freeway. And I heard this crash, crash, and they broke two windows. My teaching career was over. My teaching career was over. I thought. I meekly made my way back down to the office, sort of crept into the office, gave them my paper, and I thought I would never teach again. And I still laugh about that. And for my Samoa friends who are Zooming this morning, you get a good chuckle out of that. I was fortunate to be hired by the Anaheim Union High School District, the wonderful principal, Tommy Thompson at Laura High School. I had the privilege of coaching under legendary Herb Hill. And in my first assignment, I was teaching history and I was coaching sophomore football with a man I just loved, Louis Reese. And Louis, we called him Louis the Rock. And we coached sophomore football together. And at the end of the football season, Louis says, John, I need a little help in wrestling. And I said, Louis, I've never wrestled. I don't know anything about wrestling. And he said, no, you'll be fine. Come on, come into the We'll wrestle. And then that day, as you see one of the earliest slides, wrestling was not very big at Loera High School. We had maybe 15 kids in there. We worked out, and this is the honest truth, in the boys' dressing room. There was no wrestling room at that time. So kids were sitting around the edge of the dressing room, dressing to go out for their sports. We were practicing on a little postage stamp size mat. Very few kids. When things got really hot, we would take the mat outside and wrestle on the grass and on the mat. And we had our dual mats there in that small little dressing room. And that was Loera wrestling at the beginning. At the end of the sophomore year, and this was 1970, Louis told me that he wanted to spend more time with his son. And would I take over the wrestling program? And again, Louis said, I didn't know anything about wrestling. You know, what can I do? And he said, if you don't take it over, we won't have a wrestling program at Loera. And I said, okay, I'll take it over. So I took over the wrestling program in 1970 and tried my best to be a coach. And this is where the crucible comes in. I didn't know anything about wrestling, as I said. It was somewhat brutal in the room, but I worked real hard. I tried to use some of my military experience and, be real officious and stuff like that. Tried to recruit some kids. I went to clinics and read books and everything. And it was time for our first match. And I can remember that I thought it would really be neat to get nice warm-up jerseys and to buy the kids these red beanies so that everyone would look uniform. Off we went on the bus to Western High School. And we walked into the gym and I realized we were in real trouble. They had men on their team. They looked like men. They had tattoos, beards, and all of them were buff, big muscles. Their coach was a big, strong looking guy. And I brought my little Loera guys in there with me, and we warmed up. And then the match was about ready to start. And I can remember I went to the lowest weight class. It was 96 pounds. And I was rubbing his shoulder. I said, good luck, get out there. And he walked out on the mat. I turned around and walked and sat back down on the bench. Before I could get to the bench, he was behind me. I said, wait a minute, you're supposed to get out there to wrestle. He says, coach, I just got pinned. Just a couple seconds. I thought, that's not good. And then I looked down the bench and I didn't see a wrestler who was going to win. I think Rick Muma was there. He's listening today. He knew exactly what I meant. Fortunately, one of our wrestlers tied. We walked out of that gym losing to Western High School that night, 52-2. I can remember getting on the bus, driving back to Loera and looking at the young men that had just wrestled and the disappointment. Some were crying, some were beat up and had marks all over them. And I said, I'm never going to allow that crucible to happen again, a trial and tribulation. I'm going to do everything I can to make Loera wrestling successful. I continue to go to camps and this, that, and the other thing. And a couple of years in, I had a young wrestler came to me by the name of Greg Ewing, and he said, Coach, my dad used to wrestle, and he said that if you go to these wrestling camps, you can get some good information. Basically, what he was telling me is, if I were to go to a camp, I can learn how to wrestle. And I sort of smiled and I knew what he was saying. I said, go ahead, go to the camp. I think that'd be great. Maybe bring back some information that'll be helpful to us. And that he did. He went to a camp in Oklahoma and he came back with one solitary move, which we refined over the years at Loera High School and became the infamous cross-face cradle. And Loera High School went on to have great success in wrestling. And I want to say over and over again, teaching is difficult, but it's the greatest job in the world. And one of the reasons, along with teaching and coaching, is because of the young individuals that you come in contact, the young boys and girls. And in wrestling, I loved every single wrestler that came into that room. I had wrestlers that had cerebral palsy. I had wrestlers who weren't strong, wrestlers who were weak. I had a young man without an arm that wrestled. I had the most unbelievable young men wrestle at Loera High School. And it was my privilege to be with each and every one of them. I love every one of them. I didn't care whether they won a state title or they won one match during their entire career. Anyone who had the courage to come into the wrestling room and wrestle and to put up with me and to put up with all of that heat and everything, I love very much. As we went through our career of wrestling at Loyola High School, we liked to have phrases that we used, and I would put them up on the wall. The wrestlers could see them, and it really became sort of a way of life. And where it was with Sergeant First Class Watson, work for the people who work for you. I think the one thing that resonated the most at my time at Loera was, if you think you can, you can. And that sounds pretty simple, and it's really a message today if you want to take away a tidbit or two. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you won't, you probably won't. And we would put those posters up all over and try to get the kids to really believe. We didn't have the strongest, the meanest type of wrestlers, but we had individuals that really worked hard and believed in themselves. If you work today, it's going to be tomorrow. You'll be ahead of yourself. If you don't do anything today, it'll be tomorrow too. And we used other little cutesy little phrases and things. Bad habits are like a good bed, easy to get into, hard to get out of. The road to success is marked with many parking spots, and just keep getting after it. And we even went to Yogi Berra for some of our sayings. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. We used to laugh about those, and those were the things. I also enjoyed every single day teaching in the classroom, had the opportunity to teach local heritage and the history of Anaheim and the history of the Y. And those were wonderful days and days I've never forgotten. And I appreciate and love every single individual wrestler and student that I had during my career at Loyola High School and my administrative career in the Anaheim Union High School District. Have some slides to show you now of those times. The first slide, hopefully it's up there. That's the last slide of me returning. Short little slide. This is my classroom at Loyola High School. And as you can see, I like to decorate it, put all sorts of things up at the wall. I quickly realized from my education psychology that most students, if they listen to you for 20 minutes, you're doing an exceptional job. So I believed as I would beeble on there at the front board, very different teaching techniques that they use today, but as I would beeble on, that they would at least have some things to look at. Next slide. This is the one that I was talking about with those exciting beanies. I believe that's Rick Mooma, second from the right there. This is at Western High School, as I said, and this was right before we got beat 52-2. And you can see Western High School and the Pioneers, and you can see those wonderful, exciting beanies that they all wore. Needless to say, they were quickly thrown in the trash. Next slide. This is, you've seen this earlier, this is a Loera started to develop into what I consider to be a fantastic program. And you can see all the young men and women, and we had girls in the program a little later on, all the young men and women that were in there in that photo that worked out in that room, which was a very small room with that big self-discipline, which is still in that room today, of believing about, disciplining yourself and doing the things that you have to do in life that are right. Next slide. And I would, at the end of the season, give a card to each wrestler. And I would tell them just to keep these cards in their wallet for what it was worth. And when tough times would come, they could then pull these cards out and maybe they would help them out a little bit. Next slide. And this is what the back of that card looked like. There's a couple in there that guys will look at and will laugh about sucking up and don't be a puss and things like that. But, and the grammar's not always right on that. But those are little cards that I gave it. And believe it or not, some of the wrestlers now, almost 50 years or so, still have those cards in their wallet. And one of the, Pat Hayes sent me his card, and this is his card, which I photographed there. Okie dokie. Into that, we'll move into what I call the sort of final crucible, which maybe many of you are here to sort of listen about, and that's climbing Mount Everest. I never, ever thought I would climb Mount Everest. It was never on my list of great things to do, and why would anyone climb Mount Everest? You know, never, 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 never. Back in 1970, I had a few students came to me and said, when I was at Loyola High School, can we climb Mount Whitney? And I'd never climbed Mount Whitney. I didn't know how high Mount Whitney was. I said, I don't know anything about it. And they said, well, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you can organize it. So with a few Loyola wrestlers and parents in 1970, we climbed Mount Whitney. And Mount Whitney is about 14,496 feet. And I can tell you, at the top, I didn't feel well. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. Barely made it to the top. Got down. I was so happy. And I said, that is the end of my climbing career. I was a Boy Scout, did that whole thing and went camping the Sierras, but that, never talked about climbing mountains. A little later on, took family across the Sierras, our infamous 75-mile trip across on the High Sierra Trail. We climbed the back of Whitney. But again, that was sort of the end of me climbing. I like camping, but I didn't, get really excited. No one wants to go out and get sick at the top of some mountain. A few years later, 1983, still teaching, just about ready to move into administration. I had some students come to me, again from Loyola High School, members of the Y, and they said, we'd like to climb Mount Rainier. And I go, Mount Rainier, I don't know anything about Mount Rainier. And I still to this day remember one of the students said, it's not as high as Whitney, you can do it. And I said, okay, and we got in the car and we drove Washington, Mount Rainier, and quickly realized that we were in pretty deep. Mount Rainier is a glaciated mountain. In order to climb Mount Rainier, you have to go through a course. You have to know how to use an ice axe, crampons, boots, ropes, the whole works. So I said, okay, we're going to do this. Did it. And we climbed Mount Rainier in a little bit of a storm. We got about halfway, and I think there was maybe 20 people on our expedition then, our climbing team, and 10 of them turned around and went back. We kept going, not because we were really excited about getting to the summit. This is 1983. These two other students from Loyola High School and myself, we had paid $185 to climb that mountain, and we were going to get our money's worth. And we did that. That was our only motivation. We got to the top and finished it off. And that was Mount Rainier. That was the end of it. Not going to climb any more mountains. Then a couple of years later, my son, Ryan Dalen, came to me and said, Dad, I'd like to climb Mount Rainier. I said, that's pretty difficult, Ryan. I can tell you, personal experiences. He says, I want to climb Rainier. And I said, okay, we'll go climb Rainier again. And off we went, took a little class. We climbed Rainier in a pretty serious storm. We made it, very proud to be with him on the summit. And as we were coming down, we had a man who became a mentor and someone we truly fell in love with, Phil Urschler, one of the most famous mountain climbers in the world, who was our guide, owned part of the company and everything that was guiding us, said, you guys did a really good job. I think you can climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And Ryan and I sort of turned my head and I said, Mount Kilimanjaro? That's 19,000 feet. I got sick on the top of Rainier, sick on the top. I don't know about that. And he looked at me and he said, come on, let's do it. So off we went to Africa to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I really rue the fact that my son, Sean, could not go with us. He was married at this time. He had children, and I can tell you, John, you would have been able to climb all those peaks with us. And it was just too bad that we couldn't have been father, son, son in our endeavors. We climbed Kilimanjaro, 19,000 feet. We had a great time. It was difficult, great weather, came down and did a safari. And on the way out, Phil Urschler, our guide again, turned to us and said, hey, you guys did a pretty good job. I think you can climb Mount McKinley. or Denali? And he was a good businessman, of course. And we looked at ourselves and said, whoa, Denali is the highest mountain in North America. Uh, you got to pull a sled. It's too weak, cold. I don't know. And of course, Ryan looked at me and says, what do you think, Dad? I said, I don't know, Ryan. During the summer, we were both sort of teachers. Can we get off and do this? And we went ahead and we climbed Denali. And it was a great climb, a beautiful climb. We're pretty lucky with the weather. Made it all the way to the top safely and down safely, which is most important in mountain climbing, needless to say. And on the way out, there was Phil again. You guys did a great job. How about climbing Mount Elbrus, the highest mountain in Europe? And we went ahead and did this. How about climbing this? He was always, engaging us. And we just moved along climbing high peaks in Argentina and places throughout the world. And finally, we realized we were sort of on the path of climbing what they call, we saw slides earlier, of the seven summits. So 7 summits. And of course, what is the epitome, the highest of the 7 summits, the highest peak is Mount Everest. Harkening back to Denali, I can remember the time that Ryan and I were outside our tent on our climb of Denali. Phil was in the other tent and he put his boots outside. We looked around, his boots were outside, and we snuck up to his tent and just held his boots because he had been on Mount Everest, had summited Mount Everest a couple of years, or a couple of months, excuse me, before, and we thought there might be a little rock from Mount Everest or something like that that we could keep. That's the closest we were going to go to Everest. But it was time to do Mount Everest. I was 65 going on. I was still in pretty good shape, but as we comically say, my hubcaps were coming off, but my fenders were still there. They said, before you can do that, we won't take you unless you do this mountain. And Ryan and I then climbed Choyoyu, which is one of the 14 highest peaks in the world, over 8,000 meters. And it took a long time to climb that, a little over a month. And we successfully climbed that. And now we did Everest. And I talked to my wife, Sue, about it. And she said, as she always does with love, that she believes strongly that we could be successful, give it a shot. And you've trained hard, and we trained extremely hard, and we got our climbing permits and all of that, and we were off to Mount Everest. Flew to Nepal, loved Kathmandu, did that whole thing, worked our way up the valley, the Khumbu Valley, arrived at base camp, and now we started rotations. And rotations is where you go from base camp and you go up so far, you try to acclimate a little bit, you breathe better, and then you come back down, you rest, and you do it again. Very, very difficult. I sort of liken it to the situation where somebody knocks on the door and you open the door and you walk outside and the person beats you up and you say thank you. You go back inside, you close the door, you hear the knock on the door the next day, you got to go out the next day and take another beating and come back. That's the way it was, up and down, up and down. And as we were doing this, the key thing is you were able to breathe at a higher altitude. But as you did that, your physiological body was going down. You felt weaker, you didn't eat as much, et cetera, et cetera. So we waited and waited. And finally, it was our time for the summit. And it takes 5 days to summit. You just don't walk from base camp just to the summit. We made it to camp 1, we slept. Camp 2, we slept. We were supposed to go a little bit earlier, but there's a little bit of wind, so we waited. We made it to Camp 3. In Camp 3, you put on your mask, you start to take oxygen in. You're in what they call the death zone, which is always a great thing to think about. And we sat there in the tent, and Ryan got a lot of sleep. I was nervous. And then we moved up to the highest camp before you summit, and that's called the Call and South Call, and it's Camp 4. And you will see a photo here in just a second, not yet, about what it felt like being there. And then at about 8 o'clock, We were in our tent. We had eaten, and it was 8 o'clock at night. A storm had come in that nobody knew about. The storms usually come in from the south. This one came in from the north. It was blowing, and we didn't think we were going to get a chance to summit. Now, you got to realize you're in the death zone. You can only stay there for so long. You only have so much oxygen, and we saw our summit bid disappearing. You couldn't sleep. The tent was, flapping. The wind was blowing. And then at about 8 o'clock, I heard this scratch on the side of the tent, and it was the Sherpa who was responsible for me climbing, who essentially took me to the top. Danaru Sherpa. He said, "John, it's time to go." So I pulled myself out of the tent, put my crampons on, and off we went. And I felt bad. Forgot about Ryan, sort of. He quickly caught up with us, and up we made our way to the summit of Mount Everest. And we were in a big storm. It was very difficult. It was very cold. We got up to a place called the balcony where you change your bottles. One of our teammates, a young female, was crying. Three of our teammates had to turn around because they were frostbitten and were having trouble breathing, high altitude. And Ryan and I sort of sat there, are we going to keep going? And our Sherpa said, let's continue. And we continued up. We were now on the southeast ridge of Everest where there's no communications. We had walkie talkies before. There's no communication with camp. You're on your own. And up we went. Up we went. And Ryan was in front of me, and he'd get a little bit ahead. He'd wait, and up we went. He fell down once. I thought he was going to go fall down 10,000 feet. He kept going ahead, kept going. And I was getting more and more tired. I was remembering all those great sayings that we had when I was in the wrestling room. I didn't think I was going to make it. I wasn't sure. And I kept pushing on and pushing on. I was really, really tired. Sort of caught up with Ryan, and I stopped, and the wind was blowing. We could barely hear each other. We were sort of shouting. And I said to him, "Ryan, I'm not sure I can make it. I'm very tired. I'm really trying hard. Why don't you go on and climb for the Dalen clan? And I think I may have to turn back." I thought I could make it to the top, but I wasn't sure I could make it down. And that's where everybody dies on their way down. Mountain climbing is great. Getting up's okay, but getting down is mandatory. And that was in the back of my mind. And he looked at me. And now we have the classic role reversal. Where I'm the father and he's the son. We sort of get a flip. He looked at me and he said, "Dad, I think you're all right. I think you can make it. Why don't we go just another 5 minutes? Just another 5 minutes. See how you feel. And then maybe, we'll talk about it then." Doesn't that sound as I remember myself always when I was driving on trips with the kids? They would go, "How much farther, Dad? How much farther, Dad?" And it was sort of a role reversal. He was feeling good, and I was barely hanging in there. And we did our way 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Next time we wait 5 minutes. We kept going, inching our way along up that southeast ridge. We got to a rock outcrop that we didn't know anything about. That was very difficult. About 40 feet, you had to go up with a rope. And there was a girl sitting there. She was Australian and she was crying. And there were very few people on the mountain that day because of the storm. And she was swearing. And it's great to hear an Aussie swear. I've never heard any words like that come out of a young lady. And she was sort of crouched down, and I said, I could barely hear her. And I don't know if I can get up this. And her Sherpa sort of went and they dangled a rope down, and she started to pull herself up. Well, here it was, young female right in front of me. And I just took my two hands, put them on her gluteus maximus, if you know what I mean, and sort of gave a little push. And she went up a little bit further, and then they pulled her up a little bit further and pushed her up a little bit further. And she finally get to the top, and she was crying, and it's great. On she went. And I realized that I had also made it up that rock, just trying to help her out, and got to the top. And Ryan and I looked at each other, and we were just just covered in snow and whatnot. I think we can make it. We made our way across the traverse where it's 10,000 feet down here, 12,000 feet down here. You're walking on this little ledge. We made it across. We made it up through the Hillary step, and we made it to the summit of Mount Everest together. He sort of waited for me. We walked there together. It's very emotional. There's a YouTube of me crying on top, trying to remember all my family friends, thanking Sue and everything. And I was completely, totally tired. I had had it. And people always ask me how it is on top of Mount Everest. And I said, well, it's a joyous event. You try to, celebrate as much as you can, take a few shots, but you have to get down, and that weighs very heavily on you. And so we proceeded to start down. And I cannot tell you how tired I was now. And you see bodies up there that sat down and didn't come down. Ryan and I had sort of made a decision that we would never look at the bodies, but they would be off to the side. For those of you who've read Into Thin Air or seen the movie Everest, you know that there are people up there still because they can't bring them down. And you think about that on the way down. And I remember I was so tired, I was so dehydrated that I wanted to sit down. And my Sherpa, Anaru, said, John, if you sit down, you won't get up. And that's pretty encouraging to go. And I kept telling myself again, all those wrestling things, if you think you can, you can. Hang in there, work as hard as you can. I thought of all those young men and young girls that I had taught and coached in wrestling, and that helped me get most of the way down. But finally, it had it. I had to sit down. And my Sherpa said, tell you what, I'm going to hook you. And we dug into the snow and found the line that runs there. And we hooked in, put our carabiners in there. And he said, let's see if you can slide down. And there'll be a picture I'll show you shortly of what it looked like, which I slid down. And I just sort of hooked into this and I bumbled my way down the pyramid face for about a quarter of a mile. My Sherpa was laughing all the way. I think I was crying because I would come up to rocks. I couldn't care. I just slid right over the rocks. And we made our way back to Camp 4, climbed into the tent. We were crying, both Ryan and I. We grabbed each other, and we still had a ways to get down, and we worked our way down. And happiest, to say, day of our life when we finally got back down to base camp after having climbed Mount Everest, which, as I said, was father son, keeping in fact Sean too, but father son on top of the highest mountain in the world was pretty unbelievable. Have some slides to show you now. And hopefully they'll be coming up. And first little cue slide. This is Mount Everest, and you can see that's to the left. That is Mount Everest. In the middle there is Lhotse, and that is the infamous Khumbu icefall. And the Khumbu icefall is a very difficult situation. That's where most of the people, unfortunately, will die, other than on the way down, because once you're in there and the earth starts to move, it's all over. The Khumbu icefall is like your refrigerator at home. If you look at your ice tray with all those ice cubes in it, just pretend all those ice cubes now are the size of a building. And when that starts to rock and roll, you have trouble. So we would make our way up and down and finally summited on the top. By the way, the time to summit Everest, we left at 8 p.m. We summited at 7:55, which is essentially 12 hours. How far did we go in 12 hours? 1 mile and a third. Think about that. How quickly you could walk a mile and a third. It took us 12 hours. Next slide. This is me in the tent. That is a deer in the headlights, as we say. You can see the look on my face. I'm now under oxygen, and this is right before we're about ready to summit, getting ready to summit. Next slide. This is Ryan and I on top. You can see our masks are reamed up. That's ice and everything. And pretty unique individual, needless to say, is Ryan. Unbelievable. He was feeling great. He did a great job, took all these shots. Next slide. This is my Sherpa, a man that I've grown to love and say how proud I am. His son is named Tershing John Sherpa, and he named him after me. And we were very close and continue to be close together. He had summited Mount Everest. I believe this was his 16th time. The whole story of the Sherpa group and how hard they work for little it's amazing. He now fortunately lives in the United States in Colorado. I would not have ever come close to summiting Mount Everest without Denaru Sherpa. Next slide. I believe this is going to be a video, and hopefully it will play. That is Ryan on top of Everest.
We got it done. Really excited. Love you, Annie. Mom. Sean, you can do this. Thinking of you. But we got it done. And we're stoked to get on our way home now. No view today, but the joy's all there. Got to get down with everybody soon.
That was Ryan on top of Mount Everest. Sort of apologize if you look at the camera here, but looking at the screen too at the same time. So see my forehead, that's what I'm doing. But that was Ryan on the top, photographing. You can see looking in his mask. That was me on the other side of the mask and the people, and it's chaos up there. We had to get out of there quickly, snowing and whatnot. And we had to get down and we were short on oxygen. Next slide. This was a photo that was taken on another expedition, but I just wanted to show you that this is what the southeast face of Mount Everest looks like. This photo was taken from Camp 4, and those are headlights of people making their way up to the top of Everest. And you can see how steep it is. You see the light at the very bottom, and then the next light up that starts in the rocks. That's where I slid down, bumping along into base camp. So that's Mount Everest. We have another slide now, and I believe this will be another video. This will be a video of Ryan, just as we are making our final descent, coming through the Khumbu. This is Ryan walking over a crevasse.
Tight the rope.
Yeah, hold it tight, thanks. Now, just gonna record over a short one here. A little idea of what it's like going across the ladder.
Would this be Untitled Chapter? I just wanted to give you a quick little update. I've been talking to my heli boy, and he is also available for just flying out with
Thank you, Dawa.
actual not having to have.
Dawa was Ryan's Sherpa, Dawa Sherpa, and that was Ryan going across those ladders, which I can tell you went across those a lot faster than I did. We made our way down finally through the Khumbu. We embraced at the bottom, and we had climbed Mount Everest. Incredible. We were so happy. We returned to the United States, needless to say. It took us, leaving from LAX to when we landed at LAX again, it took us 62 days to climb Mount Everest, 62 days. We landed in Los Angeles. Sue greeted us again. And the thing that now I remembered, work for the people who work for you. If you think you can, you can. And the thing that I remember from Ryan helping me was a phrase that he used: keep on keeping. Continue to work as hard as you can, keep on keeping. Thereafter, I decided, hey, why don't I do this Explorers Grand Slam? And I went to the North Pole and pulled a sled 100 miles to the North Pole. And that was a very exciting situation, very cold. You're supposed to ski to the North Pole, but I can't ski very well. Had to go over these pressure ridges. And what I did basically is I walked to the North Pole. It's really neat because there's only one North Pole, and it's your North Pole because basically the North Pole is floating on an ice cube, and you've got to find 90 degrees and all of that north. And I stood on that, and that was the Dalen North Pole forever. Thereafter, didn't climb, but I did the South Pole, flew down to Tierra del Fuego over across the Drake Passage, and we did the South Pole. And the South Pole was about another 100 miles of pulling our sled. The only difference from the South Pole and the North Pole, it was very, very cold. One day and pulling our sled, it got down to 45 degrees because the wind chill factor, 45 degrees. Your entire body had to be covered. You had to make your way as best you can. So I have some slides to show you now of the South Pole, North Pole. This is the north. You can see us going over these ice ridges, and you can see what we're wearing, an anorak. We're pulling sleds, and the sleds were about 60 pounds. Wasn't all that bad, but you had to go over these ice ridges, and then you had to go over open water at a time and make your way around open water. Not an easy situation. Next slide. This is the North Pole. And I was so excited, and in about 2 seconds, I was no longer at the Dalen North Pole, as I say, because the ice moved. It's only about 3 feet deep there. You can see the ridges in the background, and it was about minus 20 degrees, which at that particular time, we considered to be a pretty nice warm day. And that is the North Pole. Next slide. On to the South Pole. You can see now I'm on skis, a lot flatter, but higher, about 10,000 feet, but you just go straight and you pull for about a week. We pulled about 7 days and you would go, I think 110 miles there. The difficult part on the north was sometimes you would pull, but because the water was moving and floating and whatnot on the ice, you'd actually lose distance. On the South Pole, you just pulled straight on. And that's me pulling. You can see the ream and the ice and ice on my face. Next slide. And this is me at the South Pole. At the South Pole, there's an actual station. They have that little barber pole there, and that is the South Pole. The next slide. And this is what it was all about. You remember me kissing Sue before then. This was at the end of the Grand Slam. And this was the finish up to our 7 summits and the Explorers Grand Slam. Once again, remembering that those things that I learned as best I can during this whole time, as far as being a participant and remembering some of the things that I thought were important. And just as a review for you, is with Sergeant First Class Watson, work for the people who work for you. Second, with the education, if you think you can, you can. And with Mount Everest, keep on keeping. And it was important, all of those, as functions in my life that I was able to do those. So that sort of ends up my talk. I continue today to still look for things that I think will motivate me and attempt to find goodies that will motivate me. And hopefully you can see this. This is a book that I've recently read about a year ago. Make Your Bed, written by the Commandant of the SEALs. And that is something my wife and I have done. Make your bed. We've done that for every day that just about that we've been married, except for the times I've been away in Vietnam and on trips. If you make your bed every single morning, you have completed a task. It is something positive you've done, and the rest of the day will go well. The book talks about, the things that you have to do to become a SEAL. You make your bed in the morning and all the trials and tribulations you go through becoming a SEAL. Life's not fair. Sometimes life's not fair, and you make your way through that as well as you can. And then I saw this just recently, speaking about what I think are great little things that may be crooked or may come out opposite, but it essentially says, you're not born a winner, you're not born a loser, but you're born a chooser. And as my mom said to me, you always can control how you feel unless you're in bad health. So feel good, make a difference, and help people out. Once again, I want to thank the YMCA for having me here today. I want to thank Rick for having me here today. All of this is about me just talking about my experiences, but also I want to thank sincerely all of you who have contributed to the YMCA, who have made a difference in the YMCA. You've helped the community of Anaheim. You helped the young men and women of Anaheim. And excuse me, I thank you very much for listening this morning. Hopefully you've learned a tidbit or two. Every day is a blessing, believe me. And finally, memories are forever.
Good morning. I'm Kay Carpenter, YMCA Board Chair, and I want to thank you for joining us on this special day and that wonderful presentation from John Dalen. We are so proud to be part of the Y movement, committed to strengthening our community by nurturing the potential of youth and families, by improving the nation's health, mental and physical, and by being there for our neighbors when we are needed. We at the Anaheim Family YMCA have continuously evolved to meet the changing needs in our community and to make a positive difference. In that pursuit, I am especially grateful to our talented and dedicated staff who constantly strive to provide the best, most relevant programs and services. And to our volunteers and residents who pitch in to help in so many ways. And to you, our partners and supporters, who help us deliver on our Y mission. I thank you for being a part of our Y family and for your continued support of the Anaheim Family YMCA and to all of those who need our services. As one of the most significant charities in our community, we count on people like you who are the change makers to help us create solid citizens with solid values and better communities. But we can't do it without your support. Your donation will help disadvantaged youth take part in our programs, whether it's having a safe, nurturing place to go after school or learning to swim this summer. It could also be the chance to attend one of our camping programs, learning teamwork through a sports class, gaining confidence through performing arts, or moving toward a higher education through our STEM program. To get more information or to donate, please go to our website, anaheimymca.org. On behalf of everyone at the Anaheim Family YMCA, we thank you for your ongoing support. And thank you again for joining us. And remember, it was the sacrifice of Good Friday that led to the joy of Easter morning. May God bless you and your families. Thank you.